Hello, my name is Amina and I'm your decision-making specialist. And today, I am wondering, are you living in the Gap? Oh, not the clothing store. I don't know if that still exists. Anyway, that's not where I'm asking if you're living. What I'm asking is if you're living in the Gap, have fallen in the hole, in the crack between what you expect and want and where you are now in the reality of your day-to-day experience. What prompted that is I was reading a report, a study from Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about people and wanting and believing and expecting that they could have some kind of joy in the work they were doing while they were at work and now while they're at home remote, lots of them. And out of the people, the average was 77% expected that it was reasonable to find some kind of joy at their work, what their profession was. And guess what? The gap between what they expected and wanted and what they actually felt was a gap, a difference, a hole of 53%. 53%. So I am wondering for you in your profession, in your life, in your relationships, in you to you as your personal one, and whatever you're doing, however your life is, however your story is, your legacy, what in your area, and you can check every one of your areas, including your financial, including family, other relationships, health, everything, check. And see, what would be the percentage of your expectation that you could have, that you could feel in that area? And then exhale, be honest with yourself. What percentage are you really feeling? And what's the difference between what you would like and what you expect and where you are right now? See how big that gap is, or how small. Maybe it's not very big at all, and that would be lovely. And do it in each one of your major areas of life. And as you look at those gaps, one, cheer if they're not very big, not put yourself down if they are. Because here is the good news about doing this and about finding the gap. You have 3 choices. I always like to have options. So one option, which we know people tell you, well, lower your expectations until reality meets them. So in that case, the people would lower their 77% closer to what they felt. They would kind of close that 53% gap. And the second way is they would learn to live and not focus on the gap. They would just pretend it wasn't there, notice it, ignore the churning in their stomach, ignore the tension in their shoulders, ignore their headaches, ignore their lack of joy. Now there is another, and that is to raise themselves closer to what they expected, what they wanted, and what they deserve. In order to do that, the secret is not fun, not pretty, and very, very much the only way to be sure that you're meeting your level where you want, with what you want, who you are, where you want to go, and how you want to be. And that is to hold your nose, put on goggles, whatever it takes, and go down in the gap, go down in the hole. Except this time, you have a huge light and you're shining on that. And you're making friends with the gap. You know why? Lots of people run away, they push it, they sneer it, they beat themselves up. Nah, in that gap, in that hole, in that difference between what you want and what's going on right now is the answer, the solution, the resolution to your very basic problem. The problem always is a form of the solution. Always, always. In nature, before we as humans have mucked about with it, if there was a plant that was poisonous, very nearby that plant was the antidote. Nature knew how to do that. We're going to follow those breadcrumbs of, mixed metaphor, I know. We're going to follow the tracks, the rules, the laws, the example of nature. We're going to go down in the gap because in there is our antidote. For instance, let's say that, well, I talked about a man that wanted to be able to fly in his airplane. He was petrified of flying. And ever since he'd been a little kid, he wanted to fly. So here he was, his dream of being up in the sky flying, and his feet firmly on the ground. In that gap was an unfulfilled vision, a dream not brought to life, and always being ashamed that he couldn't just do it like he'd seen other people. Well, guess what? In that gap, in that fear, in that shame of not being able to fly, is his answer. Somewhere, if he looked around in that gap, there was an answer of something that he could do to help him realize his dream to fly. Otherwise, he had to give up his dream, learn to live on the ground, and pretend like he didn't want to fly. And every time he heard an airplane or saw somebody else get in an airplane, it wasn't him. So what he did in that gap is he looked at every angle of that fear, every angle of that shame of not being able to do it. And what he realized about the shame part is that he needed to be able to use that shame as an antidote. So he realized that shame was because he was beating himself up and being so unkind to himself. So, unkind to yourself, the antidote is be kind. So he started being kind to himself. He started talking to himself sometimes in his cloud time. And as he got to be kinder and kinder to himself, he relaxed a little bit more. And he started looking around the gap some more. And instead of looking at what he couldn't do or what he was afraid to do, he looked at what he could do. So he got a friend that would go with him. No, he didn't just jump on an airplane and fly. Don't we wish it was that easy? No, still haven't found the wand from Amazon. So if you have, could you please put in a good word for me and everybody else that's having problems with everything happening, not instantly. Meanwhile, he walked with his friend to the airport. It was not very far away. He loved planes so much. He lived really close by and he loved the sound of them, except every day he would beat himself up. So he went with his friend and they walked to the airport. And they did that for, I think maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks. And they watched the airplanes take off and they watched them land. Watched them take off, watched them land. And he did that, and then he found other ways that he could walk into an airport, finally talk to somebody that gave lessons, never made a commitment, just went in and talked. Went in, talked, went in and talked. He did that, he could do that. As he found out what being in the gap meant, he found out his other step. His other step was actually to ask that flight trainer how he got interested in flying. And so he learned that story. And no, it wasn't the flight trainer was afraid, and then he finally had an epiphany and he learned how to fly. I wish sometimes it wasn't. He just had always loved to fly and he wasn't afraid. However, when he found out, and my client was brave enough to tell him he was so afraid, the trainer said, "Come with me." So there was a plane. There was no pilot in it. It was going nowhere. And my client walked all the way to the steps. And this may sound very silly to you. It was not silly to him. He was living that. And I'm guessing, I'm raising my hand, that there are things, at least one in your life that you've been petrified of, that there's a gap in reality, and that you have managed or are managing or wish you could manage a way to go into your gap and find the antidote and be able to make progress, not perfection, progress, little steps of the way. And even if my client never learns how to fly, he has walked himself out of the gap and he knows the answers are still there whenever he's ready. So go down into your gap, always have a ladder and a lamp, and know that the antidote is there. You've got it. You've got it. Do it slowly. Don't push. Don't shove, and most of all, do not put yourself down. All right, go to that gap, go in the hole, check out the crack in between. That is where the joy is. That is where your answers are. All right? And come back. I will be here. I'll be watching for you. Good wishes. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.